M36 Jackson was one of the most capable anti-tank platforms in the Allied infantry, easily taking out German Panthers and Tigers, with its powerful 90mm M3 gun. The M36 was the last fully dedicated tank destroyer made by the Americans during the Second World War. It was meant to supersede the aging M10 and provide a slower but better armed M18. Already, by September of 1942, there were already presumptions being made that the M7 75mm 3-inch gun was only effective within a short range of around 500 meters. Engineers were tasked in creating a new gun, which would be far superior to the M7. This new gun, the 90mm M3, was also used on the latest medium tank used by the Americans, the M26 Pershing. Both M36 and M26 used the 90mm M3, and further modifications was used on the M46 pattern of the Korean War. The need for a new anti-tank gun was necessary, as proven at the Battle of Kasserine Pass, and later both invasions of Italy and Sicily proved that the need of a new anti-tank gun was necessary. A tank based upon the M10, which was primarily called the T-53. It was meant to be used as both a tank destroyer and an anti-aircraft platform, however they were both cancelled. The next stage, called the T-71, would eventually become the M36 and was completed in March of 1943, however production did not start until mid-1944, 2 years after the initial idea was proposed. The nickname Jackson comes from the Confederate general of the Civil War Stonewall Jackson, or Slugger. Officially named the M36 tank destroyer or 90mm gun motor carriage M36 by Ordnance and US Army. In combat, it proved to be much better than its predecessor, the M10, which made it one of the best anti-tank vehicles of the entire war. The first prototype of the M36 was the T-71 and was completed in March of 1943. It was on an M10 chassis. The T-71 GMC, gun motor carriage, passed all required tests with success, providing a lighter and therefore more agile tank compared to the standard M4A3. An order of 500 M36s were announced. The design name was also changed to 90mm GMC M36 in June of 1944. These M36s were produced by a variety of different American manufacturers. The upgraded M10A1 Wolverine hull was assigned to be the hull on the M36B1, and the M36B2 was based upon the standard M10 chassis with an M4A3 diesel engine. Like pretty much all US tank destroyers of the Second World War, the M36 had an open roof. This allowed for the crew to have a much more unrestricted field of vision. However, it was susceptible to air attack, however something much more lesser was thought of, the weather. If you look at some of the M36s in the Battle of the Bulge, they have roofs made in order to keep the rain and snow out, in an attempt to shield the crews from the elements. On the rear there is a 50 cal heavy machine gun, but that has one issue. You have to get out of the vehicle to use it. Its main purpose was probably for anti-aircraft defense. In the rear of the turret, there was more space for ammunition. This is because obviously the 90mm ammunition used in the M36 is much bigger than the M10 75mm ammunition. The M36 had an additional 30 cal in the hull, mounted on a ball. In action. In accordance to the US tank destroyer doctrine, the M36s arrived in September of 1944 in the European Theatre of Operations and showed good performance, similar to that of the Sherman Firefly and later the 76mm Shermans. In addition, from October to December of 1944, in addition to the standard M36s, there were 187 conversions of the standard M4A3s into M36B1s and were rushed into the European theatre. Later in the war, some M4A2s were converted into M36B2s. This also came with the roof-mounted add-on armour, which also kept out the weather to some extent. It also allowed for an upgraded 90mm M3 with a muzzle brake. The M36 was capable of knocking out any German tank at a reasonable range of 1 to 2.5 kilometers, depending on the armour thickness of said vehicle. Unlike the Firefly, the gun left little smoke after firing, in which the crew were quite pleased with. Due to its increasing demand, the M36 fell short of supply. Only around 1,300 M36s were manufactured, and around only 400 were available in December of 1944. Due to the nature of the US tank destroyers, which had good guns but weaker armour, resulted in them being very vulnerable to shell fragments and shrapnel, which was another reason why the folding panels of the B2 were installed. When fully closed, it still allowed for the crew to have some of their good view. An example of combating German armour was when an M36 of the 766 Tank Destroyer Battalion was able to penetrate the turret roof of a Panther at around 1.3 kilometers. This also became a favoured weak spot of the Panther for M36 gunners. Tiger 1s were a bit harder, but not as hard to knock out as the Tiger II. If the M36 had all the right armour, close range, and had the Tiger II's weaker sides showing, then the M36 had a decent shot in trying to kill the King Tiger. In an instance when the M36 knocked out a Tiger II was in December of 1944, where an M36 of the 702nd Tank Destroyer Battalion shot the side of a Tiger II's turret at a range of approximately 900 metres. During the Battle of the Bulge, the 7th Armoured Division was engaged with M36 at St. Vith, with a few successes aside from the artillery shelling, splinters from wood and trees, and the occasional sniper hiding in the forest setting. M18s did a lot of work, being able to assist the destruction of 306 German tanks during the campaign. The M36B2 with the roof panels had not been introduced yet, and therefore the roof was a very vulnerable spot of the tank. This also hastened the need and demand for the M26 Pershing, which had the same gun, but more armour, close turret, and a better defensive capabilities. This also allowed for the M36s to be used in mechanised groups, fighting alongside infantry instead of sitting back waiting for enemy tanks to arrive. The 90mm M3 gun's HE shell actually proved to be effective in countering infantry and provided a similar performance to the standard 75mm, but unlike the 76, it could knock out tanks and take out soft targets with good HE shells. In the attack of the siege-freed lines, the M36s were used in close quarters, fighting off enemy infantry in bunkers. According to a post-war study, per battalion was around 16 machine gun nests, 24 vehicles, 17 pillboxes and 34 enemy tanks. The M10s were gradually phased out due to the introduction of M18s and M36s, however as a result sent to the Pacific. M10s first saw combat in the Pacific theatre at Kwajalein in February of 1944. Around 7 tank destroyer battalions were equipped with M10s, M18s, but no M36s. Towards the end of the war, some M36s managed to see combat, firstly for Free French forces, and then after the war US exported many M36s. Thank you very much for watching. I hope to release my video on the M4A3E2 Cobra King. If you would like any further updates, please consider joining my new Discord server, linking in the description. If you would kindly subscribe and leave a like, that would be most thankful if you did so. That's all from me, and as always, stay safe in these difficult times. Goodbye.